Welcome back to the podcast. Hey, I'm Hannah Lynn Miller. I am your host, and today we're going to be talking about something that often gets overlooked in ministry, okay? And I don't know why you're tuning in to this episode. Maybe you're curious, maybe you're friends with someone who is a pastor's wife, maybe you are married to a pastor, and that is why you're here. And guess what? Hey, join the club, sis. I am right there with you. We're going to try to record this podcast with a little infant because she is, I don't know if her stomach is just a little bit more sensitive, but she's a little bit of a clingy baby, and we love that. What do they call it? Velcro baby. So this is how I've been doing life, and especially with a toddler. So this is a lot of fun. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to be talking about mental health as a pastor's wife. This role is incredibly rewarding, but it also comes with unique challenges that can take a toll on your emotional and mental well-being. And this is really dear to my heart, not only because I am a pastor's wife, but I've also been friends growing up. I was really close to the pastor and his family. I've seen this with people that I've brushed shoulders with when I went to Moody, and also Moody Bible Institute, which is where I got my education, and just brushing shoulders with people who have been married to a pastor, been in ministry, and that pressure that comes with being in that role, but it also not being your job. It's very confusing, okay? So first and foremost, I just hope that what you get out of this episode is that you are not alone. And if you're not married to a pastor, send this to your pastor's wife, okay? Or send this to someone that you know is married to a pastor, because odds are they have felt, I promise you, they have felt along the way at some point isolated and misunderstood. And that creates loneliness. So I promise you those three things have existed at some point around in ministry. And let me tell you, first off, my husband and I have had the privilege of serving in two churches and during our time in ministry, and they have been phenomenal, okay? I really have no complaints. I really have, yes, there's hard things, yes, things happen, but truly the people in both of those churches, I mean, I've only been at this church, FBC, for a year, and then with Judson in Oak Park, we were there for 7 years, and the people there are amazing. I mean, I fell in love with God's people, the church body at Judson, and I stayed in that position of I just, there's nothing like the body of Christ, right? So that's where I'm coming from, and at the same time, on the other hand, both things can exist where I felt isolated, I felt tired of ministry. I felt not judged, alone. Misunderstood is probably the better way of like, hey, I don't actually have, I'm at a unique church situation where I'm not finding my main source of community at church, where I think that happens a lot of the times for especially new families. You go to church to find that community, to raise your kids in that village. And that's not necessarily the main reason. And I've been lucky enough at FBC that has been the case, but that's not the main reason why, as a pastor's wife, you're there. You're there because your husband it's a job, and he's in ministry, and he feels called to that position, right? And that's a weird place to be. So anyways, all that to say is those things do exist at some point in any pastor's wife experience. I promise you. If that's not the case, please tell me how that happened, right? So I think, let me just list off some of the unique things that can happen as a pastor's wife, just so that you know, and I'm going to be speaking to pastor's wives, right? Just so that you know that I get you. I understand the unique challenge, right? So I think the first one is that you live under constant observation. People know you. I think the best way to put this is people know you before you know them. And I think that can be really odd. And it's not that people are judging you right away, but they're looking at you to kind of be like, oh, that's who Pastor Jonathan's married to, or da 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 da. I have a weird thing where that's not my first experience where I was, on a radio show and people knew of me before I met them. So I've had that experience on a slightly bigger scale. So it doesn't faze me as much, but sometimes it does, where I'm like, I don't know your name and you seem to know everything about me. And that's weird, right? That's hard. Isolation. Sometimes it's difficult to form those close friendships within a congregation, mostly due to boundaries and fear of favoritism, fear of somebody coming to you complaining, or, sometimes, and I actually welcome this. I try really hard to be a part of the solution, but when you're part of a church body, you care. So you're like, these are things that I'm experiencing at church that I would like to not experience. And then, I tend to be a safe person to talk to about that stuff. And that is cool, but sometimes it can be exhausting. That can add to the isolation factor. Having expectations put on you, right? I haven't experienced this as much. I think this might have been in previous years of being in ministry, but people expecting you to be perfect, always available, filling certain roles. I also think that maybe it comes to the fact that, John, my husband, has never been a lead pastor. We've been in ministry in different roles. Most of the time, John is really good at managing staff, so he becomes the assistant pastor. So those roles look a little bit different, where I'm not I think John and I get to benefit from leading with a senior pastor and his wife. And with that, it comes with a lot more, I think, respect, and where we're there leading in a different regard. I don't know if that makes sense, but I haven't experienced that. But that does come with the role, right? Especially depending on your denomination. Secondary trauma, I think this happens in any kind of field that you're a helper, right? It's that you're hearing about crises in people's lives, that you are close enough to observe the pain. And what's interesting is, because I'm a mental health counselor, I can clock out. I control my schedule, basically. My husband, and when we are in that ministry role, we don't clock out. There can be a phone call in the middle of dinner and somebody passed away, or something happened, or there's just a conversation to be had that is serious, or somebody's marriage is in crisis mode, and I think that can be the challenging part about this role too. And on my end, maybe I'm not hearing about it in real time, but I am the person that my husband can process those things with. And then also I have to hold down the fort when things do happen and my husband does have to call somebody and can't clock out, right? The other one that people don't talk about, and this again, I think it portrays to, it's not every pastor, and from my experience, and I don't know if this is how other people observe it, but I feel like there's two extremes when it comes to financial stress on ministry families, okay? I feel like there's either they are broke as heck and living in other people's houses, okay? Because, again, I'm not just saying this. I actually know a lot of people because I went to Bible college where people were being trained for ministry, specifically being pastors, right? So people are either living in other people's houses, not able to afford groceries and housing, okay? Or there's the other extreme where people are wearing designer shoes and jeans. So I feel like I haven't experienced, I feel like the middle ground, I don't know why it seems like there's just this really weird thing. And I think a lot of times it happens, I don't know. I think finances in church can be interesting. And John and I have not experienced that drastic, I guess, but I think that the financial stress that we put on ministry families who are not lead pastors is actually super, super horrible and not biblical and really stressful. I think that people don't always talk about that aspect. I mean, I was the breadwinner for a majority of our marriage. And then when it came to time where I'm like, we want to have kids, I'm like, we need to pass the baton. Like, you need to be able to figure out how to pay bills so that we can have housing. And I'm going to be really honest. I mean, we were going to move in with my parents if like a parsonage didn't open up. So there's just that financial factor. And if you're not at a huge mega church and the lead pastor and you're controlling all those things, I mean, majority of pastors are not making monies. And when especially now that post 2020, I mean, the financial stress just got even more because things are harder to pay for, right? And so I remember there was a time where somebody in my life was talking about they were selling a camper, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, that would be so cool to have like a camper. Growing up, like that was something that we did all the time. It was just a pop-up and it was used, right? And it was a couple of years old. And I remember that person was like our age, John and I's age, and talking about how much they're selling it for. And I was literally thinking in my head, I'm like, that is all we have in our savings account. That is literally, because John and I were both in ministry. I was the full-time one with insurance and everything. And I was trying to get my master's degree because I knew if I didn't get my master's degree, I would not be able to use my undergrad degree and become a therapist. And so I needed that, especially because I knew how ministry goes. So it's just that kind of stress. I mean, I've known pastors and their wives who have been, church planters, and talk about stress. I don't know how people do that. Anyways, just hug your pastor's wife for that, because I mean, and I've also sat in a lot of therapy sessions where pastor kids talk about, I mean, it's just, anyways, that is a big part of the stress, I think, of being in the role of ministry that people don't want to talk about or don't want to acknowledge. And so if you can like support a pastor and his family financially, I mean, I think that's really huge. I mean, sometimes I'm like, get rid of this stupid like fog lights at worship and pay your ministry leaders fairly so that they don't have that kind of stress. Anyways, not to complain, but we are thankful for the support so that John can continue to be a pastor. The lack of boundaries part, I really think that is a huge one, where it's like family should come first. But when you're a ministry family, it doesn't always feel that way. Like, I kind of have to check and be like, okay, this and this happened, and I need you to remember like who is a priority right now. And I think as we continue to have kids like that, and like our kids grow and need more hands-on things, like that is going to be even more of a challenge, I think. So all that to say is I understand where you're at. I understand all the factors, right? And I want to just point out there's a few things that I want to go like biblical when it comes to foundation for self-care, because I think sometimes we can make this all spiritual and be like self-care is selfish, and it's like, no, it's not. I think a lot of pastors' wives could feel guilty about prioritizing their mental health and thinking that it can be selfish. And let me tell you that Jesus modeled this for us, okay? He withdrew to rest. He often went to lonely places and prayed. That's Luke 5:16. Okay. And then also we are body, mind, and soul, right? So that means that our bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit as Christians. And so 1 Corinthians 6:19 says caring for your mental health is part of stewarding the body and mind that God has given you. And if you understand psychology, and that's like the study of people, right? It's like, in the mind, and you know that your mind needs that. Like, God created us for that. And I think it's cool that Jesus modeled that for us, because he knew, right? You cannot pour from an empty cup. I mean, as pastor wives, you are also, perhaps, not everyone, but you're probably a mom. And so you've got that give and take. You're a wife, and then you've also got this ministry situation that's not your job and is just a role that you play. And it's a very weird one. I give it to you, right? So The greatest commandment includes loving your neighbors as yourself, but you have to actually know how to care and love for yourself first to effectively care for others, okay? It's not a selfish thing. I think it's biblical stewardship. So practical strategies to start supporting your mental health. Okay, establish clear boundaries. Protect your family time. Designate that specific time where everything else is on the back seat and you are with your family, okay? And you might be the one who has to establish that. And if your husband is not on board or has a really hard time with boundaries, like, you have to model it. And if he doesn't want to be a part of that time, then that has to be his choice, right? Because we can't like change people or control that. But I think for you can establish those boundaries and those rhythms for your family and hope that your husband sees the benefit. And then you can continue to model it, right? Learning to say no. You don't have to attend every church event or lead every ministry. Identify your calling and focus on that. Man, I've been so lucky. I feel like nobody has really pressured me into doing a whole lot. I think at Judson, I was also getting my master's, so there was that busyness. And then also, like, I feel like at this church, I have littles now, and so I've really not felt pressured at all. And John's been really good about, whatever you feel like you can do. And I'm like excited to get involved at church. Like, sign me up. Like, I'm doing a play for the women's tea, and I'm down. I'm so excited about it. The other thing would be, not checking emails, turning off your phone. I'm really tempted to do like the brick, because that would really help keep our screen time down. And I think it would be really good to have that in our home. And I think as our kids get older, I think it'd be even better to model. And that's a really good resource. Maybe I'll link what it is down below, but I've heard really good things about it. Like, it basically turns you like tap this brick in your home, and it's like it's like digital or whatever, I don't know. And it turns your phone into like a dumb phone for an amount of time, or until you tap it again. Create physical space. So sometimes making sure that your home is a sanctuary, and you limit like church meetings or counseling sessions in your own personal space. That was really interesting when we were at Judson, because we were living in a parsonage, which for the season, it was such a blessing, because it was like we had our first baby. John was like working at the church and had his own office, and it wasn't that far away. I mean, it was literally like an alleyway, like separated the house and the church. And it was a really fun season of ministry that I'll look back on with fondness. It started to get a little hard, I think, as John was feeling more and more stressed. And so I think in the long run, it is really important to keep those boundaries. And I remember when we were newly married, we were looking at an apartment that was close to Judson, and it was still on the same street that we decided to get an apartment, but it was too close. It was like there was a parking lot separating the church. And for that season, I felt really like burdened that like it's nice not to be so close, because we were newly married and we were able to really like get away. Like, it was a good walk, good bike ride from the church. So we were still close, but it was enough distance. I felt like having it be right across the street was like too close for that season. So I think understanding what season of life you're in and what you can handle. And I definitely think keeping those physical spaces as a boundary is good. It's healthy. I know some people like to live outside of the area that their church is, and I personally really have benefited from living close to church. My dad's been big on that, with just in general living close to the church that you would attend. My dad's always like, find the church and then move around it, because it's your community, whether you are on staff or not, right? Okay, build a support network outside of your church. I think this is crucial, especially for establishing those healthy relationships in church. Like, I think having healthy relationships outside of my church community as a pastor's wife has given me the ability to go deeper and to have healthier relationships inside the church. The other thing is, and I did this back in Chicago, I had a group of older women who were pastors' wives. And again, I got to see straight up how hard church planting is from these women, and they were amazing, and it was such a good season of life. And I traveled like an hour to go see these ladies. And once I had a baby, I was like, oh, this is not going to work. So I am trying to establish that again here in Central Illinois. And it's important because they understand those challenges. And I was able to talk, like John and I were newly married, put right into the ministry role. And that's hard. And these women, I will never forget them and just their listening ear and their perspective. And I think that is really, really huge. And I needed that in that season. I also think that having a counselor in different seasons of life is really, really important too. John and I have off and on gone to see professional counseling just to have a listening ear, to have that support system, to have a professional weigh in, to talk about things, especially in relationships and family and marriage and stress and things like that. I think is really, really important. Finding a mentor, this one you have to be careful. I had a few people, I've had this happen before where somebody from a church asked me if I wanted them to be if I wanted them to be my mentor. And it just doesn't work. Because again, you're in church leadership, whether you have a title or like an official role or not, like you're still in leadership. People are watching you, right? And whether you ask for it or not, like your husband is the pastor. So having a mentor in the congregation, I don't think is healthy. I know maybe some other people might have that, like a different perspective. And I would say my mentors were older, wiser women who are married to pastors because they understand. They understand the whole situation, okay? Prioritize your personal relationship with God. I think this is really important. Separate out Jesus, the character of Jesus, from the character of your husband, from the character of the deacons, from the character of other pastors. Because if you are constantly comparing Christianity to church leaders, and this goes for anyone, you are going to be disappointed, okay? Because you get a front row seat to how the sausage is made. I know that's like a weird term, but it really is true. Like you get the front row seat to how leadership goes, how men lead, and you may or may not feel discouraged at certain points in time, okay? And I totally get it. I keep a journal. The other thing that I like to do is I like to kind of write out what I'm learning as like I'm teaching it to someone else. And that is my way of learning. I learn best when I'm teaching. And so for me, I write out my devotionals that I'm reading, and I write it out as a study, just because it helps me. And then I also have like that in my back pocket if anybody's wanting me to teach a class, or like or that's why I like to do this podcast, right? Remember that your identity really does come down to who you are in Christ. You're first and foremost a daughter of the King, and you're not just a pastor's wife, okay? And when that starts to get flipped, or I think it depends on the church that you're a part of. But depending on the church, like how much honor and respect you get, like sometimes that can overshadow like the fact that you are I always like to say I'm just a girl who loves Jesus, okay? And really that should be our heart. It should never be that I'm the pastor's wife, okay? I don't know anybody who thinks that way, but that really should never be the heart posture, I think. Remembering that your identity is first and foremost in Christ is huge. And protect your own quiet time, your own personal devotional time. Engage in fun hobbies that you like. This goes for everyone, but having those things that don't have to do with ministry, I think is really important. Go rock climbing, go biking. I knew someone who really loved to bake, and it would go along with ministry, but she really enjoyed it. And I was like, cool, go for it. That is not my spiritual gifting, okay? Hospitality is not mine. Unfortunately, I really think it would go far in this role, but I try. It's just not my thing. I think, too, making sure that you're exercising, eating healthy, getting sleep because of the stress that you can. Listen, I've known the amount of pastor wives that I've known who have had like unexplainable physical illnesses is just weird to me. Like, it's a weird thing that I have seen where they have like autoimmune diseases, like a lot of weird allergies, just some weird health things. And I think, it could definitely be in regards to stress. So I would definitely say continue to protect that body that God gave you, right? Because that is going to be the thing that will guard off all the stress. Take breaks, plan vacations. I know that, like, try to find the resources that you have, that people that are willing to give you like a space to stay. We have somebody who offered this. I think we had just moved, and I just felt like Ramo was a little too young, but they offered like a place for us to stay, to get away, to get a break. And I think that's a huge blessing. Like, if you have an Airbnb place, keep offering that to your pastor and his wife, like, because that is huge. And vacations, John and I have been lucky that we've really prioritized vacations and trips, and we were able to, but that's not always something that pastors and their wives are able to take, again, because of the finances. Practice mindfulness and gratitude. That can be really a great practice to get into. That's what I use in my journal. I have a whole gratitude section that I do every day, and that can really be a game changer, especially if you can. It's so easy to get negative, I think. It's so easy to get negative. At least it is for me. I don't know if that's... And it usually has to do with John and his job. But I don't know if that's everybody's experience. I have no idea. Managing expectations, yours and others. Clarify your role. I think that's why I've always said, whatever, I'm only going to be doing what I would be doing if I wasn't the pastor's wife. Be yourself. You don't have to fit a mold. Listen, if I am a pastor's wife, your specific personality can be too, okay? I feel like I'm the complete opposite of a pastor's wife personality, and it's probably why I graduated from Bible college without a husband, okay? No, there's other things, but I am not the quiet, mousy, I don't know if that's... I feel like that is the stereotype of a pastor's wife, and that's just not me. And so, hey, embrace the way that God created you and your giftings, right? Communicate openly if you're feeling overwhelmed. That's huge. Like, telling John that, hey, like, I feel like we haven't been able to connect. I did this the other night. I'm like, I feel like there's been a lot of ministry stuff going on, and it's taking your ability to be present with us. And I'm like, we just had a baby a month ago. Like, key in, right? And just saying, like, that is what I need from you, and what I would like. And again, you can't control their reaction to that. But I think it was really good for John to hear, and it's continually, communicating how it's making you feel. If you're overwhelmed, if you're stressed, those are really good things to communicate, because your husband can't read your mind. Okay, I wish he could, but he cannot. Release any kind of perfectionism, right? So you're never going to please everyone. Don't be a people pleaser. This role is really bad if you're a people pleaser. And that is something you could work on in therapy, okay? People pleasing. I would say, too, sometimes because of different situations or scenarios, you might want to process secondary trauma. This could be everything from like what somebody is going through at church. This could be a tragedy in the area. This could be even just some betrayal that might have happened in a church setting that you experienced. I think that could be considered secondary trauma as well, or it could be just trauma. Cultivate joy and celebration. I think this is a huge one. Try and find some ways to celebrate small wins, because when you're working with people, and this is a different kind of job. I think men especially, they tend to look for ways to, celebrate, like promotion, monetary benefits, just like all these things that they can measure success. When you're in ministry, there's no way to measure success. I know people try, but then in my opinion, it can get really hairy, and then you're counting seats, and you don't really want to be doing that in a church ministry. So try to find ways, and I can't think of anything on the top of my head, but try to have ways to celebrate small wins. Like if you're doing an event or you're getting through a holiday that seems really overwhelming, because holidays are stressful in church. Maybe celebrate that you were able to get her done, right? I think that's a really good tip. So warning signs, persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness or emptiness, that is depression, like on a low scale. I would say if you're having a hard time getting out of bed, if your change in appetite is happening, you're hungry, or you're overeating or you're undereating, loss of interest in activities that you once enjoyed, difficulty sleeping, or you're sleeping too much. Sometimes changes in weight could be an indicator that something's wrong. Fatigue, lack of energy, difficulty on concentrating or making decisions, increased irritability or anger, withdrawal from relationships. I think that can be a good indicator that something needs to change. Physical symptoms, this is a big one, digestive issues or headaches. So any of those symptoms, these are symptoms that you need to take seriously, and is a sign that you can reach out to a mental health professional. I give you permission, okay? There's no shame in getting help. And in fact, it's like courage takes courage, and it's wisdom, right? And so I give you that permission to do that for yourself, okay? Sometimes you just need someone to come alongside and say, these are some warning signs and something is not okay. And I know you've been feeling that way for a little bit, but sometimes we don't listen to ourselves because we're like, no, you're fine. Other people have it worse. And that's not true. Like everybody has their own journey, especially when it comes to the mental health. And so those are some warning signs. When you're feeling chronically overwhelmed, anxious, or depressed, when you're struggling in your marriage, that's also a good green flag for going to therapy. If you've experienced any kind of trauma, I mean, and I would say too, if it's related to ministry, when you've experienced some kind of betrayal or something just really went wrong at the church that you used to be at, or something like that, you've had a falling out, whatever it is, that's a good indicator that, hey, this might be time to talk to someone. If you just need a safe place to process your feelings without judgment, that alone is a green flag, okay? And if you want tools to manage anxiety and stress and to build resilience, that is a whole nother great reason to go to therapy, okay? And finding a Christian counselor who understands ministry life can be beneficial. You don't need that, but it can also be really, really helpful. I know a lot of practices can offer a sliding scale too when working with ministry families, and I think that's really cool. So do not count that out. Creating a personal mental health plan, assess where you're at. You want to identify your biggest stressors. You want to list your support resources. Who do you talk to? Who are safe people? And then set some goals before you go to therapy, and establish some accountability. Like tell your husband, tell a friend or a family member that you trust. And then look at those goals regularly, like when you're going to therapy, as you're going to therapy, okay? And if you're a husband and you're like, I want to be able to support my wife in this role, here's some just quick things that you can do to support your wife. Respect her boundaries, okay? Don't assume that she's automatically signed up for every situation that comes up in ministry. Someone can say, yeah, I totally want to be a pastor's wife, and not understand what that role is until they're in it. And sometimes that role changes 7 years in, right? Like I signed up to be a youth pastor's wife. That's so different than assistant pastor. Acknowledge her sacrifices. A simple thank you goes a really long way, I think, especially if you're her husband. Understanding and like being understanding and acknowledging it, being like, wow, I'm so sorry that you have to listen to this again, or I don't know what that would really look like, but just acknowledging the sacrifice, right? Protect your privacy. Don't be telling everyone about everything that's happening. And especially like if this is the time where you're having kids, like make sure you get the sign off that you can share that with people, like, oh, okay, blood pressure's up again or something like that. Like be praying, like make sure that you have that sign off that she wants, because it's going to get around the whole church. Trust me. Here's some scripture for encouragement. Matthew 11:28 is a good one. Psalm 46:1. All right, sis, like your mental health matters, not just because it affects your ministry, but because you matter to God and you are his daughter, created in his image, worthy of care and compassion, okay? Ministry will always make demands on you, and there will always be one more need or an event or one more crisis, but you can't pour from an empty cup. So taking care of your mental health isn't selfish. It's necessary for sustainable long-term ministry. Give yourself permission to rest, set boundaries, ask for help, and prioritize your own well-being. The church needs you healthy and whole, not burnt out, not depleted. Your husband needs that too. Listen, he needs somebody to be able to talk through things with. Remember, God doesn't call you to do everything. He calls you to faithfulness in what he specifically called and asked you to do. And really, at the end of the day, he wants you to delight in him. And if ministry is taking that delight out of your relationship with God, something needs to change, because really that is what he wants you to do is just to delight, right? It's the abundant life. It's not this like should or I'm called or, there's these tasks. Yes, there is, but at the end of the day, it's really God's desire for your life is that you delight in the relationship that he has with you. And that needs to take priority over something like ministry, church ministry, which a lot of times is just a lot of programs. Okay, let's be real, right? All right, before you finish listening, here's some 3 action steps. Okay, identify one boundary that you need to establish this week. Okay, and cultivate it to the relevant people. Schedule one self-care activity for yourself in the next 7 days and actually do it. Reach out to one person who can be part of your network. Start thinking about who can I talk to. And if that is a counselor, cool, man, that is great. And I'm proud of you for reaching out and getting help and the support that you deserve. You can do this. God is with you. He will give you the strength and wisdom that you need, okay? And I'm going to say this one thing too, is that prayer is huge. Prayer is a huge tool that you can use. And listen, sometimes I just am in the car. My toddler doesn't know what's going on. The baby doesn't know what's going on. And I just cry out. Like, I'm like, God, this and this and this and this is happening. And I just need you to hear me right now. And that's real, okay? That's what sometimes you need to do as a pastor's wife and for your own mental health. You can cry out. God is great with emotions, okay, and feelings, and so don't hesitate to use that tool as well. Thank you for choosing to spend time with me and listening to another episode of the Abundantly More podcast.